Well, good morning, everyone. Thomas Montgomery. It's a beautiful Monday morning. Today is January 23rd, 2023. We're going to be talking about an important topic regarding, in essence, an option of how to build wealth. I had an opportunity to work with Alfred over the weekend on this. Alfred, I forget if he's from Goldman Sachs or Lehman Brothers in his earlier career, but Alfred's point for today's discussion was that we needed to provide a more visible, more tangible example to each of you to understand how the debt portfolios, how the collateral support program can help someone build their wealth. Because regardless of how well you're doing in life or not so well, we all should be trying to grow our money, right? We want to prepare for life's known events and unknown events, retirement being one of those. So again, shout out to Alfred for his help putting this together. Let's go ahead and go through it. So the topic of today's spreadsheet is the debt portfolio liquidation illustration. Anytime if you have questions, you need help, support at businessparalegalcorp.com. One of the principles that Alfred really wanted me to convey to you is that as business owners, we're always looking at ROI, return on investment. Number one, we know that assets especially, are not going to come to us for free. That's too good to be true. That's naive. That's, as he called it, financial illiteracy. So it's always about calculating or predicting our ROI, return on investment. So keep that in mind as we go through today's discussion. We're talking about the benefits and then the financial mechanisms of debt portfolios. And I know we've discussed this before, but let's briefly have a synopsis of the three primary benefits of the debt portfolios, then we'll get down to the calculations. So the number one reason that most small business owners come to us and want to buy a debt portfolio is because they have a collateral shortfall. They want to qualify for a loan for funding to start or grow a business, and again, as Alfred would say, good business, bad financials. So a lot of times these are good people, good business ideas, but their financials are not strong enough to get approved. Specifically, they may not have the collateral to pledge to be able to get approved for the loan. So that's the first of the three reasons why someone would probably be interested in getting a debt portfolio. Now, we're actually going to talk about one of the other elements today more so, but that certainly is the primary reason that clients come to us for the portfolios. The second is that it improves liquidity on paper, because we're literally transferring $100,000 of receivables over to the financials of the company, the client. And with that, it's categorized, because it is accounts receivable. So AR is part of liquidity. You might say, well, how does that work? Well, the way that lenders typically look at liquidity is it's measured as cash plus cash equivalents. So are we suddenly putting $100,000 of cash into the client's account? No. What we are, though, suddenly doing is putting $100,000 of accounts receivable. That is a cash equivalent. Cash equivalent fits into the formula of liquidity. So for small businesses that's looking to position their business, their financials for raising capital, certainly resolving collateral shortfalls and improving liquidity are invaluable. It's very important. Today, we're going to talk about the other aspect that maybe you're not as familiar with, which is that using the debt portfolios is a mechanism to make money, significant money, quickly. And that's what the purpose of the ROI calculator is. So let me scroll down, and we're going to go through the ROI calculator, return on investment. Again, shout out to Alfred for helping put this together. But essentially what he said is we should have some fields that are editable. So those are the yellow, and these are the fields, and we'll play around with them. We can do what-if scenarios. So there's three primary variables that we can manipulate, and we will together today. And then from that, we're able to generate a projection of the income that we would receive by buying a portfolio, and, as Alfred emphasized, the ROI, return on investment. All right, so we start with the portfolio structure. Debt portfolios historically have been multi-million-dollar portfolios of defaulted mortgages, defaulted auto loans, credit card defaults, so forth. In our case, what we're doing is we're breaking the portfolios down into smaller buckets of $100,000. So it's 10 accounts of typically $10,000 a piece. So it's a $100,000 debt portfolio. Now, we have some clients that buy multiple portfolios, so we can increase this in terms of the number of accounts. The other portfolio structure is that these agreements have daily late fees. So the debtor, so we have to get the glossary down, the terms, right? So we have the debt buyer. The debt buyer is who's buying the debt. The debtor is who owes the money to the debt buyer. The debtor has $50 a day late fees. Well, why is that relevant? Well, think about that for a moment. So we'll take Jeanette, for example. She's one of our debt buyers. So let's say that Jeanette buys a new portfolio, and within that Jeanette, we'll just pick a name out of the bucket. We'll just say Tony. So Tony owes now Jeanette $10,000. Tony's one of these accounts. But Tony's indebtedness to Jeanette literally goes up $50 a day once Jeanette invoices him or has someone invoice him. So over a 30-day period, which is the number of days in the average month, now Tony owes Jeanette $1,500 more than what it started. So these are actually income-producing debts that are growing because of the late fees. We have a couple assumptions that we can play with. The first of which is a common question that we get. Well, how long is it going to take to collect this? Fine. So, these are debts that these debtors now owe me, but how long is it going to take to collect? Well, we can play with some assumptions, and we're going to actually talk about the triggers down here in just a minute about when people may pay. But we're starting with an average assumption of 60 days. And then we can play with, well, we know we're not going to collect dollar for dollar, right? Well, let's say, again, we'll use the example, Jeanette's the debt buyer and Tony is the debtor. And Tony comes to Jeanette and says, hey, I can't afford that $10,000 I owe you. Would you agree to $7,500 if we just cleared it now? And so Jeanette might say, all right, I'll give you a 25% discount, wire the money over. Well, that would be an example of not 50%, but 75% of that one debt. So we're going to go through and play with different assumptions and see that even if we collected a very small amount of the debt that's owed, it can still generate a remarkable ROI. But we'll start with the assumption that we'll collect half. When we get to debt buying, sometimes people, when they're not familiar with an idea or a concept or a process, they become skeptical. So let's step back and look a little deeper at debt buying, which I gave you a little bit of a precursor to a moment ago, that historically it's been large portfolios, multi-million-dollar portfolios, often of defaulted mortgages, for example. But let's go through 5 points about debt buying background to make sure we all have the same foundation. First of all, I understand very few people know about debt buying for wealth building. It's just not something that's taught in school. A lot of people are illiterate of it. They think about buying and selling real estate, maybe flipping real estate. They think about maybe buying stocks and bonds. Maybe they think about buying gold or precious metal or even cryptocurrency. But when it comes to debt buying, this is a playground often of the rich. And what you and I are doing is bringing it down to Main Street off of Wall Street. Secondly, regarding debt buying, it's certainly a growing industry and can be extremely profitable. And that's the point of the ROI calculator, to predict profitability. And we'll be doing that momentarily. Again, the debt buyer, we have to get these terms down. So the debt buyer is the person that's buying the non-performing debt at a discount. And the people that owe the debt buyers are called the debtors. So debt buyers make money by buying debts cheaply and collecting from the debtors. So if you were buying debt, you wouldn't go pay $100,000 for a $100,000 portfolio. Why? Because there's no margin there. And frankly, you probably won't collect dollar for dollar. It's going to be some subset of that, which we're going to play with those assumptions here in a minute. I was just talking to Miranda this morning, one of our new debt buyers, and she's like, well, how do I get this money in? Well, you have to collect it somehow. Just as a business owner, no matter if you're a lawn care business, an automotive repair, an architect, it doesn't matter what business. If you have AR, you need to have a revenue cycle plan, as they call it, to convert AR into cash. And so we can take care of that for our debt buyers. I told Miranda she can do it herself. It doesn't matter, but we need to ask the people to pay. And if they don't oblige, as they're contractually committed to, then we're going to need to escalate it. One way to do that is through litigation, which is our model. All right, so now we've covered the basics of a portfolio structure, assumptions, and debt buying background. Let's go ahead through one more element, and then we'll dig into the ROI calculator. So we were talking earlier about, well, when is it that the debtors will pay? When is it when they'll pony up and pay so the debt buyer is generating cash flow? Well, there could be several triggers that could motivate the debtor to pay the debt buyer. Really can be best described as 4 triggers. So the first thing, when we're facilitating the debt collection for our clients who are debt buyers, the first thing we're going to do is send a demand notice out to the debtor to clarify, here's what you owe, here's why, here's what you need to do, and if you don't resolve it, we are going to sue you. So demand notice is the first step. The courts would expect that to be done, so it's compliant. And then in some cases, people will say, oh, shoot, I don't want to have to go to court because I'll probably lose and I'll have additional costs like court fees and so forth. So that can, in fact, motivate some people to pay. I am not saying that all people will pay just because they've received a demand notice. That's, again, too good to be true, but some will. How many will? It's a roll of the dice. Could be, let's say we have one portfolio of 10 accounts. It might be just 1 or 2 that'll pay off the demand notice. Could be 4 or 5. It's a roll of the dice. We don't know, but this is the process. So if they don't pay or make agreeable payment arrangements off the demand notice, then we're going to file the case. And so that's part of what we do, is we literally develop the citation, submit it to the courts, and then have the debtor served. So that's where the sheriff or whomever is going to their house in the evening, knocking on the door, scaring the shit out of the kids, or going to the debtor's work and talking to the debtor's manager and saying, hey, I need to go find that Tony guy. He's going to get served for a lawsuit, for example. So the case filing could be a trigger that would motivate someone to pay, because now they realize, oh shit, I'm in this pretty deep. But maybe not. Maybe it has to go all the way to discovery. Discovery is, to me, the most amazing part of the litigation process. That's where legally and ethically we can ask for information from the debtor, and that can be somewhat time-consuming and uncomfortable, collecting a lot of information from them. That, again, could cause them to say, you know what, I just want to pay. I don't want to go through this anymore. But some people, none of these triggers will work, so we get all the way to the trial. Now, statistically, we know on a national basis, 80 to 90% of people will not show up for trial when they're sued. Therefore, our debt buyers are expected to win by default 80 to 90% of the time. So that leaves the other 10 to 20%. Some of those people will actually hire an attorney to represent themselves against us in court. We love when they have an attorney. That's the best thing. Anytime someone hints towards, well, I'm going to get my attorney involved, we'd say, please do. Maybe schedule a call, a settlement call with your attorney. Because when attorneys review the defaulted contracts, the attorneys realize the client owes it, because these contracts are written well. But Regardless of the 80 to 90% of default judgments that we would anticipate receiving, we have about 10 to 20% that will go to trial. And this is the whole process that we take care of for the debt buyers through the process. So the debt buyers don't have to go call on people, because these people can be ugly, right? When you're reaching out to them and say, hey, you have a balance due, they'll insult you, and they'll insult your family, and they'll threaten you. And it's ugly. It's an ugly process. We like it. You probably wouldn't, and that's why we offer to do it for you. The case filing, the discovery, and then we get to the trial. So these are the 4 triggers where the person could pay. The question we were trying to answer is, well, when will they pay? Well, it could be triggered off of any of these 4. But in the end, they will pay. They owe the debt. They will pay. Even if we have to do liens against their bank accounts, against their paychecks, they'll pay. They'll pay. All right, so with all that being said, now we're ready to use our ROI calculator. So let's start with some basic assumptions. So let's say that we're going to buy one portfolio of $100,000, and that's typically composed of 10 accounts, $10,000 a piece. So we got $100,000 of money owed to the debt buyer. We're assuming that it's going to take 60 days until payment's received. Some of the money will come in, most likely, almost very likely, beforehand as we go through the process, but we're going to be conservative here. And then we're going to make an assumption that we'll collect 50 cents on the dollar. Could be more than that, could be less than that. Again, we'll change and vary these assumptions as we go through. But based upon these assumptions, then the debt buyer would expect to bring in $51,000. So wait, the debt buyer only pays 1% down of the debt portfolio. So to transfer title of the debts. So the debt buyer pays $1,000 to acquire $100,000 of accounts receivable, and they end up having a projected gross income of $51,000. Do the math on that. Now, there are costs involved with going through the process. So if we just want to drill it down and look at ROI, which we have a formula here, it ends up being about a 250% ROI. And you might say, well, how does that work? What does that make sense? Well, let's say that you were to spend $1,000 instead of buying a debt portfolio, you put it in the stock market. You would expect over a year's time that your money would go up 13%. That's the historical average. Which is bigger, 13% or 257%? This is not just a little bit bigger. This is massively more than what you would anticipate receiving in the stock market. You might say, oh, well, I'm into real estate. Well, great. If you look up by industry standards, if you were to buy and flip real estate, the industry average is a 51% return. Here, we're still at 5 times that. Not a little bit more, not double than real estate flipping, not tripling, not quadrupling, but quintupling using these assumptions. And we're going to make these assumptions less generous in a minute to see it still pans out, even if we had poor performance, which we don't expect. Oh, I want to go buy gold or precious metals. That's averaging around 1% per year. Overall on real estate, not talking about flipping, just buying and holding, about an 8.8. So I don't know that you're going to find another way to acquire assets and see greater return, greater predicted return than with debt portfolios. So before I change these assumptions, I'd like to get your questions, comments, feedback so far. You can type it into the Q&A. It's like a chat box of Zoom. Does everyone understand what we're doing? We're saying if we were going to help a small business owner accomplish 3 things, we want to help them resolve a collateral shortfall, we want to help them improve their liquidity on paper, and we want to help them grow their wealth, grow their money. Then here's the calculator for that. All right, so Randy's asking a good question about the debt tours. So anytime you're involved with debt buying, it means it's non-performing debt, people that didn't pay their mortgages on time, so the mortgage foreclosed, or they didn't pay their car payments on time, so the car was repossessed. They didn't pay their credit cards or other contractual arrangements, so they're in default. So thank you, Randy, for pointing this out. What we're talking about here with debt portfolios is what we call non-performing debt. Still owed, still valuable, still collectible, but it's not people that are already routinely making payments. If so, we wouldn't be able to buy it so cheap. Great question, Randy. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and change this up so it's not so generous. So we'll keep the 10 accounts, because normally clients are buying a debt portfolio of 100,000, 10 accounts of 10,000. We have some that buy more, but let's leave that standard. Let's say that it took a little bit longer to get the money in. Now, again, we know that there's different triggers. So there's going to be some people that pay just from getting the demand notice. They want to resolve it. Some once they get the case filed against them, some as they go through discovery, and then pretty much the rest at trial. So in truth, we don't know how many will come in. Here we're saying if we're just looking at an average time. So, but some people will pay before the average, some will pay after. But we could change that and make that 90 days if you want. But this is the most important variable right here. How much of that debt are we going to collect? Well, I've got a little secret for you, and I'll share that with you now. There are different ways to categorize a debtor. And when we're going through our litigation program, we're going to look for the most collectible clients. We're going to look at their income. We're going to look at home ownership, because when we put liens against homes, people get all wiry and want to pay the debt real fast. We look at their credit. So for the litigation program, we're going to focus on what we call our premier accounts, those that are the most collectible. So the truth is the number is probably more like 75% for the premier accounts. When we change that to 75%, now we're looking at 78,000 return for the purchase of one portfolio and almost a 400 ROI. But let's be very conservative. Let's say that it went horribly and we only collected, 10%, 10.00. So only $1 out of $10 did we collect. Was it still worthwhile if it's that low? Well, we expect to return $10,450 of gross income. So that's in addition to resolving the collateral shortfall so we can progress in the funding process. That's in addition to improving the liquidity on paper by adding the $100,000 of cash equivalents. On number 3, even at 10%, we're at $10,450 return, which is about a 52% return on investment. Well, is that good? Again, think about what are your options to grow wealth? Well, I could go put the money in the stock market and I could very well lose money like most people did last year because of economic conditions. But even on average, the 20-year average is 13%, which is bigger, 52% or 13%. 52% is infinitely larger, almost 4 or 5 times larger. It's still better than flipping real estate without the headache and effort, because this is passive, right? We're talking about passive money generation, not active. We're not talking about going out and buying a franchise with Subway and going to work and making sandwiches every day. This is not laborious. This doesn't take your time. It doesn't distract you from the other things that you're doing in life. And then obviously 52% is way above gold or average growth of real estate. So, we can keep playing this. What if we only receive 5 cents on the dollar? Well, with 5 cents on the dollar, our ROI is still higher than the stock market. So we do feel comfortable projecting 50 cents on the dollar. And the reason for that is we're going to litigate our premier accounts. We're going to focus on filing lawsuits against people that have the wherewithal to pay. Hopefully the people that have a wherewithal to hire an attorney, because we love when debtors hire attorneys. There's no faster way to settlement than them getting their attorney involved. It's interesting how many broke people say they're going to get their attorney involved. And again, we're not being sarcastic with them, but it's like, fine, let's schedule a three-way call with your attorney. As you'd expect, that often doesn't happen with broke people. All right, so let me give you a quick summary and then we're going to answer any other questions. The goal today was to go through a quick discussion of liquidating debt portfolios. Because as Alfred would say, it's all about the ROI. I mean, all of us should have a responsibility to ourselves and to our families and our loved ones of what are we doing to grow our wealth? Grow our wealth so we have money and reserves in the future for retirement, for unexpected expenses, and so forth. All of us should have a plan to grow our wealth. Now we might say, oh, well, my plan is to start or grow my small business. Nothing wrong with that. But any financial advisor, which I'm not one, would strongly recommend some element of diversification. Here is a way to position the business to be able to borrow money, as well as diversifying the wealth accumulation. So 3 benefits we discussed of acquiring a debt portfolio. We understood that we have some editable fields that we can play with to determine how much money we think that we'll bring in from just the debt portfolio. Some people are a little simple-minded and they'll see this and say, well, wait a second, I'm going through the access to capital program. I should get 100,000. Yeah, we're talking above and beyond that. We're not talking about debt. We're talking about earned income. This is money that doesn't have to be paid back, right? So this isn't in lieu of positioning the business to go borrow money and take on debt. This helps the business position to take on debt, but it's a whole source of earned income, passive earned income that doesn't have to be paid back. And if we use reasonable projections, and all right, Alfred wants me to go to 25, so I'll do it. But even at 25% expected collections from the debtors, we're still at 130% ROI. How much more is that than everything else that's available in the marketplace? So what questions do any of you have? I'll make it a bit smaller so we can see the whole screen. Who has any questions on the liquidation process? All right, so Timothy's just asking how to do it. So if you've bought a portfolio, let us know. We have an Adobe, it's called an assignment form, that allows us to take on the responsibility to go litigate it, to collect it for you. And then we'll do that. We're happy to. We're good at it, and it's our pleasure. And so then we'll take care of the process to get these people to pay. We can't promise who will pay. We can promise we'll go through the process. We know that some people will pay, and chances are some people won't. We will get your permission to substitute accounts. If we see any of the accounts that you have as we dig into look less collectible, we'll ask for your permission to substitute in one of our premier accounts. And I really believe that 25% is a way understatement, but we'll leave it at that per Alfred's request. Anyone else have questions, comments, concerns on how to grow one's wealth, how to build money, how to, I guess, make money without the work? It's passive by using debt portfolios. Again, big banks and wealthy people have bought and sold debt portfolios for decades. It's just the average person hasn't been introduced to it, and often the average person couldn't afford to get a portfolio. Our model is breaking down the portfolios into bite-sized pieces, 10 accounts of an average of 10,000 a piece. So it's a $100,000 portfolio. Randy's asking about the cost of buying a portfolio, and that's a good place to stop, or to wrap up our call, I should say. Well, there's 2 answers to that. We can sell debt portfolios retail or wholesale, and I'll describe what that means. So normally when someone comes to us, they're buying a debt portfolio, what we call it retail. So we sell it for 10 cents on the dollar, very reasonable. And we even finance it with 0% interest. They'll pay 1% down, the rest of it will be paid out over time, over a year at 0% interest. Very, very fair, and that way we can get the cash flow going through the process as quickly as possible. So ideally, the cash coming in would more than cover the cost of the portfolio while they're still receiving the other benefits of the portfolio that we discussed. In terms of, so that's retail. Wholesale is any of you who are distribution partners can be a debt buyer yourself with the intent to turn around and be a debt seller. So in other words, you're buying a portfolio at wholesale, which I'll describe, and then you're turning around and selling it greater than that, usually at retail, to clients or others. So when we sell a portfolio wholesale to like you, Randy, you would pay just 5 cents on the dollar, 5,000 for the 100,000 portfolio, and then you would normally flip it and go sell it for 10 cents on the dollar, 10,000. Thus, you made an easy, fast and easy $5,000 profit. So how much the buyer pays depends upon if they're buying wholesale, like you, our distribution partners probably would, or retail, which is when we're selling direct to the consumer. So two different price points, wholesale versus retail. You would buy it wholesale. Customers would normally pay retail. Normally it's a $5,000 spread. Now I got Ernest, who's not on the line right now. He's buying a portfolio, I think today, wholesale. He's already got a buyer lined up, Robert. And so he's going to turn around and flip it and sell that $100,000 portfolio to Robert, from what I understand. He's going to collect 10,000 from Robert. And so thus he's made 5,000 profit in one day just by flipping it. Again, I know a lot of you are very successful, but most small business owners have a collateral shortfall. Most small business owners don't have adequate liquidity or ideal liquidity on paper. So you and I can help those two aspects for those that are looking to position their business for a capital raise, and also help them make money while putting an extra $5,000 in your pocket. Because the fact that you're making $5,000 doesn't diminish their ROI. These are still the numbers that they would expect to receive, even though you just got wired $5,000 profit. It's a good side gig, right? Do that once a day. Do it once a week. For some people, do it once a month, and it could improve their financial outlook. Anyone else have any questions on debt portfolio liquidation? Sam's asking if he can get a copy of the spreadsheet. Absolutely. Just email us if you want a copy of the spreadsheet, so then you can go in there and you can play with the assumptions. Just email us and let us know that you'd like one. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you back tomorrow. Have a good day. Bye.